Great to see who all's joining us. We've got people from all over. It's very fun to see all the states that are represented today. And again, we'll get started in just a few minutes. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, we will be getting started in just a couple of minutes. But while you're waiting, please do use the chat function to introduce yourself, your name, city and state, and congregation or organization if you have one and you'd like to share that. It's fun to see we've got people really from all over the country joining us. And so we welcome everyone. We're so glad you're with us today. This is great. We see people from Kansas and South Dakota, Oregon, California, New York, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, Arkansas, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Montana, Colorado. So glad you are all here today. We want to welcome you. Please continue to use the chat function to introduce yourself and share your name and where you are joining us from today. And we're going to get started here in just a moment. But it's very fun to scroll through and see where everyone is coming from, and to know that you're all a part of this Interfaith Power and Light community from all over the country. So welcome. We're very glad that you are here today. My name is Reverend Susan Hendershot, and I'm the president of Interfaith Power and Light. And our mission is to inspire and mobilize people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. This webinar is focused on taking bold and just action through advocacy with your members of Congress, which can also be applied to policymakers at all levels, whether at the local, state, or the national levels. And as we get started today, I just want to share a few logistical details. First, we invite you again to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, city and state, and congregation or organization if you have one. And feel free to drop comments in through the chat function as we go through our time together today. And again, you might want to make sure that that is set for all attendees and panelists so everyone can see your comments today. And if you have questions as we go along, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom right hand of your screen. That will allow our team to make sure that we catch your questions so that we can be sure to respond to you. So again, the Q&A function is at the bottom right hand corner of your Zoom screen. And we are recording this training, and we will be sending it out to all of you following the webinar today. So thanks again for signing up and being with us. Interfaith Power and Light is a national network with state affiliates located in 40 states across the country. If you are not already connected to the affiliate in your state, we'll drop the link into the chat for where you can find your state affiliate information. We encourage you to sign up to receive updates from the affiliate in your state and find out how you can plug in locally and statewide with activities that are going on in your location, and connect to others who are close to you as well. In this webinar, we will be providing some basics on lobbying your elected officials on climate action, including planning, scheduling meetings, building relationships with staff, and most importantly, why we lobby. So you can see the slide here, the agenda for today, the federal policy landscape in 2021, IPL's policy priorities, the importance of constituent lobbying, best practices and tips, lobby pitfalls to avoid, and of course, next steps. We are finally in a position to pass strong climate legislation and to undo some of the damage that has been done during the past 4 years. In order for that to happen, it is critical that policymakers hear from people of faith and conscience about why you support climate justice. We have a unique role as people of faith, speaking from our religious values that guide our decision making. These values include compassion for those who are suffering, justice for communities that have been seen as disposable in our thirst for fossil fuel production, and love for our children, God's creation, and the sacred. This voice is powerful, and we want you to be emboldened to use it as an advocate for climate justice, which is why we are bringing you this webinar today. And it is my privilege to introduce today's speakers. Jonathan Laycock-Nisley serves as IPL's Federal Policy Associate in Washington, D.C., where he tracks federal legislation on behalf of the IPL network. Tiffany Hartung serves as IPL's National Field Director, working with supporters across the country as advocates for climate policy. And Miriam Robles, a new member of Arizona IPL's Executive Board. Miriam has done extensive lobbying and will share how she stays grounded when meeting with policymakers. Thanks also to Bill Bradley, IPL's National Organizing Director, for planning this webinar and his support with technology today. And with that, I will turn it over to Jonathan. Thank you.
Thanks, Reverend Susan. And it is so wonderful to see so many people from all across the country. This is a great group we have here. So like Reverend Susan said, my role is to represent IPL affiliates, people of faith generally who care about creation care on Capitol Hill. And one of the great things that I get to do in this role is work with other national religious organizations who focus on environmental issues. And we have a regular meeting where we check in with each other and coordinate our work. And so over this past fall into the winter, we spent time working together on figuring out what exactly it was that we wanted to communicate to the Biden administration, to the new Congress, and how we could turn our shared values into legislative action. So we can go to the next slide and you will see the faith principles, with faith as an acronym, that we came together on as a faith community. So I'll just read them quickly. We recognize that in our own work and in legislative action, we must be centering frontline, vulnerable, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities first. We need to accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy and commit to net zero climate pollution in our electricity by 2035, and then economy-wide across everything that we're doing by 2050. We need to be investing in climate resiliency and sustainable infrastructure, and I'll definitely be talking more about that in a moment. And I think especially as the faith community, it's important that we're being vocal on our support for justice for workers in fossil fuel industries. So we need to be transitioning our workforce to clean energy jobs with support and job training for workers, especially those coming from the fossil fuel industry right now. Finally, we can be honoring creation by promoting protection and conservation of public lands and oceans. And so these principles were agreed to, were signed on by over 24 national religious organizations, including a number of denominational bodies for Christian churches, representing millions of people of faith all across the country. So we we have this declaration of principles, and then we also had a document outlining the legislative and administrative actions that we see coming from these principles. And we can go to the next slide. And these are some of the opportunities that we're going to have for action in this Congress. I think we're going the wrong direction.
Slide back.
There we go. So our opportunities for action on climate this year are really going to be centered around Congress's agenda on COVID relief, which makes sense because the further we've gotten into this pandemic, the more it's become clear that the solutions we need to deal with the pandemic are very much related and similar to the solutions we need to deal with the climate crisis. There's a lot of overlap. So the first opportunity we have to pass climate legislation this year is with the current $1.9 trillion relief package that Congress is debating. You may have seen this in the news. This is the package that could have another round of checks, $1,400 checks, and would extend a bunch of important safety net programs that were last extended in December. And those programs that were extended in December are currently set to run out in the middle of March. So that is kind of the deadline for Congress to get this passed. That is the finish line they are working towards, making sure that this is signed into law by March 14th. So one of the really important provisions that's included in the package currently in the House version is $100 million for environmental justice work. And this is so critical because we've seen more and more data showing that the communities that have been forced to breathe polluted air are the most likely to be most negatively affected by COVID-19. Communities that have had the most damage done to their lungs are the most susceptible to a virus that attacks the lungs. And because in the US, our placement of polluters is so often racist, that's most often Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities who are bearing that unfair burden of pollution. And it's part of the reason those communities have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So we are calling for legislators, especially on the Senate side, to protect that $100 million that will monitor polluters, make sure they're following the law, and also provide funds for cleaning up sources of pollution in communities that are bearing that unfair burden. So that's our first opportunity, is this current package that's where Congress is looking to pass by the middle of March. The next opportunity, after Congress does this kind of initial relief package, Congress and the White House are going to be looking to do a longer term economic recovery, rebuilding the economy in a more holistic way. And they've already indicated that the top focus for that economic recovery is going to be an infrastructure package, which with a strong climate focus. So we've seen all too clearly in the past couple weeks how related our climate needs and our infrastructure needs are, with the problems happening in Texas. The winter storm with freezing temperatures knocked out large portions of Texas's grid, rolling blackouts, leaving people without power in freezing temperatures. And some of those problems are uniquely Texas, but a lot of them are national problems. A lot of, our national grid needs help right now. It needs to be modernized, and it especially needs to be made ready for distributed power generation. Our grid wasn't initially built to be ready for solar on every rooftop. And part of what we can do right now in this infrastructure package is modernize our grid so that it's ready for the shocks that are coming, and also so that it's ready for all of us to be producing power, because that is definitely the future. Relatedly, we need to be updating our water infrastructure. Too many of our communities still don't have clean water, and Flint, Michigan has been kind of the most nationally recognized case story on this, that the lead pipes in Flint are still in place to this day. That's true for many, many communities all across the country. It's especially true for indigenous communities, not lead pipes necessarily, but a lack of access to reliable drinking water. And so we need to be investing in our water infrastructure also as a way to create jobs coming back from COVID-19, but also as a way to provide people with the basic services that we all deserve. Another exciting proposal that we're going to be supporting for this infrastructure package is the 30 million solar homes initiative. And this has come from a nonprofit energy installer called Solar United Neighbors. And it's looking to target households that are currently receiving monthly energy assistance from the federal government to be first in line for getting subsidized solar power. So this would be a great way to lower those households' monthly energy bill. It would lower the amount of money that the federal government has to spend on energy assistance each month if they're getting a long-term fix rather than just a Band-Aid each month. And it would also lower our climate pollution by producing clean power. So this is really, really a triple win and something that we think needs to be a top priority. Of course, any infrastructure package is going to have to include transportation, and there are going to be great opportunities to incentivize electric vehicles and expanding our electric vehicle infrastructure with charging stations, as well as fleet vehicles, kind of, trucks, transporting goods. All of these things need assistance to start the process of electrifying. And we need to be investing in good public transit. I think it's 3 million of our essential workers across the country are depending on public transit each day. And of course, that means all of us are depending on public transit because our country would not be running right now without our essential workers. So in the short term, we need to be, just helping these transit systems stay open, providing them the funding they need. But in the long term, we can be funding expansion, new routes, new lines, and connecting people both within our cities and between our cities. The final thing I'll mention is the Reclaim Act. And if you've been following IPL's national advocacy for a few years, you may have heard of this one before. The Reclaim Act is a bill focused on coal communities with abandoned coal mines, and it would provide funding for cleaning up those abandoned coal mines, as well as economic development work, whatever projects that communities want to move forward on for that land once it's cleaned up, the funding would be available. So this is another one that has great benefits of, environmental cleanup, immediate jobs available through that work, as well as the long-term jobs that can come from economic development. So that was a really fast overview of a lot of different priorities. You can be dropping any questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll be getting to those later. But for now, I will pass it to Tiffany.
Thanks, Jonathan. So we can go to the next slide, and I see that we've got 64 people from all over the country joining us today, and it's a little curious. Want to find out before we dig deeper into the training, the sort of what experience you all have with lobbying, and learn a little bit more about you. So we've got a couple of poll questions here. Bill, if you could tee up our first poll. So you can see that we have the 2 questions here. So please take a moment to fill this out. What have you lobbied before? No, not at all. You're new, you've done it before, or you're an experienced professional. I think we have my guess is we've got a range of all of those joining us today. And then also curious to see what policymakers have you lobbied before? Have you lobbied the president? That's quite notable if so, but perhaps not likely, but curious to see who you all have lobbied. So we'll just take a moment to let you all fill that out. Okay, so let's see. Bill, can you show us the results if they're coming in?
They are. People are still answering, so I'm going to give just a few more seconds.
Okay, thanks. We'll give it just a moment.
So I see a question from Fran. Hi, Fran, in the chat about, can you define lobbying? That's a good question. I think the way I think of lobbying is you have lobbied or had a conversation or a meeting. I think perhaps the way that we're talking about it in this context today is we're meeting with our elected officials or a decision maker and asking them to advance some policy issue, or perhaps just educating them around an issue. Okay, it looks like the results are coming in. I'm guessing folks, let us know if you can't see those. Looks like we've got 29% have not lobbied before. About 60% have lobbied once or twice, and 12% of you are experienced lobbyists. Your old hands at this. Somebody's lobbied the president. Whoever that is, let us know who you are in the chat and which president it was. We've got a mix of folks lobbied the Congress and the U.S. Senate, some governor lobbying, a good bit of state legislator meetings and lobbying, some city council, mayor, and others. And then some folks who haven't lobbied before. So thanks for sharing that. I will turn it back to Jonathan to give us a little bit more about, start walking us through the basics of lobbying.
Thanks, Tiffany. Yeah, it's really great to see that range of experiences that we have on the call here. And hopefully by the time we're done, you will all be ready to go out and check another box on that list. So I want to just start with, talking about the moment that we're in, who it is that we're going to be targeting, and why it is that we are the people who should be doing this work. I spoke before about the opportunities that we have for climate action this year, but I think it's worth hammering home that these are really big opportunities. These are maybe once in a decade opportunities. With the last recovery package in 2009, President Obama's first year, in responding to the Great Recession, some of the funding that was passed there really shaped a number of areas for the decade to come, including up to today. There was funding in that package for solar and renewable energy that really shaped the renewable energy boom in the US. And so I think that was an $800 billion package, something like this. We're talking about $2 trillion here, and then another one after that. So this is money that is going to shape the country for many, many years to come. We can go back to the previous slide. So this is the year, this is the time. Why are we the people? Reverend Susan talked about this a little bit, but some of the top values that I see in advocating from a faith perspective. One, we're bringing a moral voice. We can be speaking, beyond just the economics of an issue, but also to right and wrong. We can be a prophetic voice, speaking to what needs to be, and centering communities that have been left out of these conversations as both decision makers and also as the beneficiaries of these policies. And two, we can be reminding our elected officials of the deeply interconnected nature of this work. When we are caring for creation, we are at our most basic level caring for our neighbors. And we need to be reminding our legislators of that interconnectedness. So also thinking about who it is we're going to be talking to. Sometimes you will have meetings directly with members of Congress, which is great. But a lot of the time it's going to be with staffers, which honestly is also great. The members of Congress have to deal with issues that touch literally every single aspect of US life, and they cannot be experts on all of it. And they lean heavily on their staffers to be advising them and guiding them in their decision making. So never feel discouraged about talking with a staffer. That is an important meeting. Even with staffers though, they often have broad areas too. They may be covering environmental issues and also agricultural issues, and water issues. There are so many things that could be in their portfolio. So, don't assume that they are already familiar with whatever it is you're going to be talking about. Always start with an overview of a bill, even if you think they've heard of it before, to make sure you're on the same page and to show that you can be a resource to them. If they have questions that you can't answer, you can always reach out to me or someone else on this call, and we will get you that information. If you can, show over time that you are a reliable resource on these issues, that's an incredible way to start forming a relationship. And the last thing I'll say on lobbying in this present moment is that it's a really unique moment. I'm guessing many of you, like me, are feeling pretty sick of Zoom at the moment and have maybe said some uncharitable things about it in the past year, but it has leveled the playing field right now. The high-powered lobbyists who are getting paid, millions of dollars a year have the exact same access as you right now. Everyone is Zooming into meetings with their representatives on Capitol Hill. And so, this is a time where you can be building those direct relationships with DC staff, even though meeting with offices in your district, in your area is also great. This is a time where you can be having those direct meetings with the DC decision makers. So I will pass it back to Tiffany now to say a little more about the structure of a lobby meeting.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, Zoom. We all love Zoom, but it is making some of this easier. So if Bill, if you could go to the next slide, I'm going to walk through just a little bit about planning your lobby meeting. So one tip is really sort of do your research about the elected official you're meeting with. Just a quick Google. Well, if you don't know much about them, a quick Google will turn up any quotes they have in the paper or in the news about the particular issue that you're meeting with them on. Get to know, do a little bit of background on them, know a little bit about where they stand on the issues. Maybe you could find out, do a little more digging, a little more cyber sleuthing, and learn more about their faith tradition. That might be helpful to know going into the meeting. As sort of thinking about, as Jonathan mentioned, having the importance of our community in sharing with and meeting with our elected officials is thinking about one thing is helping to sort of give them stories to point to when they're talking about a particular issue. So thinking about those particular examples that you could be sharing and stories that you could be sharing with your lawmaker when you're meeting with them. Lawmakers loved it. It's helpful for them to have sort of a mental Rolodex of stories to go back to on a particular issue, whether it's doing an interview in the media or speaking on the floor. And so helping to provide them a story about some congregation in their district or people in their district that they know and they've met with is helpful, and they will appreciate that. And I saw some conversation in the chat about that it's really that remembering that this is about building the relationship with them and their staff. You want to become a trusted resource for them, and that does take time. And you want to make sure not to burn any bridges and sort of having that line of communication be open. So something to keep in mind. And then the last thing I have to say on sort of preparing is make sure you're preparing to listen. Listen carefully to their responses that they give, and maybe what they might be saying in between their responses that you could read into. Maybe they might be saying something that is helpful to sort of that you can read into about particular constituency that they're hearing a lot from that is opposed to this issue, or that might be supportive that you could connect with as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Miriam to really get into some of the best practices and tips for newbies.
Hi all, thank you so much for having me. I'm super humbled to be here with you all. I am a member of AZIPL. I have been on both sides of the lobbying conversations. I worked as a staffer for representatives in the state of Texas, and I've also worked for a couple of nonprofits including AZIPL. I'm not a staff member. I'm just part of the organization. And so I know I have a good idea of how it works. What draws me to lobbying and to being part of this process is that I am a documented person, and part of the impact of the environmental crisis is really heavily burdened on undocumented people and immigrants. So I use what resources I have to bring light to that situation, especially here in Arizona, where we see a lot of that. So going into the best practices and tips, if you are starting as a lobbyist, or if you going into your first lobby visit and are nervous, I have been there, trust me. But here are some tips as to how to prepare, what to do during, and what to do after. Beforehand, you definitely want to set out an agenda that outlines what you plan to discuss for the meeting, and send it out to all those who you will be attending. Jonathan and Tiffany both mentioned that most of the time you will be meeting with staffers. Even if that's the case, definitely send the agenda to everyone who is in the Zoom call. That way they know what you're going to be discussing. And then just really quick practice of reconfirming a week or so before the meeting is really useful. It'll bring it back to the staffers' radar, and they're really busy people. So obviously, looking at their agenda and knowing that they need to prepare for this meeting is a really great thing that you could remind them of a week before. And then always dress for the meeting. I know we're all on Zoom calls, and I'm 100% definitely wearing sweatpants underneath this button shirt, but even just looking nice, making sure the lighting's right in your room, having some best practices for Zoom calls is always great, to look directly at the camera, all that sort of stuff that we are now adapting to as we transition into Zoom meetings is just good to keep in mind as you go into a meeting where you may be nervous or you feel like it's very intimidating, right? So while you're actually on the call, make sure not to be late. Even show up to the call 5 to 10 minutes early. Make sure your internet connection is working, and stick to your tight agenda because they are busy. Make sure to get to your point of the meeting quickly and be succinct. But you also want to build the relationship. So this is going to be a little bit difficult for you. Just watch the flow of your conversation. Obviously, introduce yourself. Talk about what brings you to want to talk to them, which for a lot of us is our faith, right? So open up the conversation that way, but also know that you can't derail completely and start talking about where your favorite restaurant is, or where you go to church, or where you've traveled to before. They are very busy people, so make sure to introduce yourself, but get to the bottom of why you're there. And this can be really difficult. So it means when you are making this transition from your pleasantries to asking, making your ask, or talking about what you are looking for your elected official to do for you, sometimes it's best to phrase something as an open question. Like, for example, what are your priorities this season? Or the session, sorry. What do you think will be the highlight of the session, and what will you focus on? Or even bringing up specific bills or acts that you are keeping tabs on. And just listen to, I think Tiffany mentioned it, or Jonathan, that sometimes they will reveal something in their answers, which may not be the information that you're looking for, but it's always good to store in the back of your head. It's always important not to get them off topic, and feel free to ask questions about where they are in the legislative process. At the end of the day, your elected officials are there to serve the community, and if they are not being transparent or honest, or are not serving you in the way that you think you should be served, there is a way to go about communicating that, obviously. But at the same time, you definitely want to be respectful. I think Tiffany mentioned that it's really important to build a relationship, and I 100% agree. Even if they are not supportive of what you want them to be supportive of, and that can really, you can really take that personally, because we have emotions tied to what we do, and we feel very passionately about what we do. It's really important to try to not take it as personal as possible, and just kind of take all the information. There is not going to be like a winning or a losing when it comes to lobbying, but just know that you went in there to talk about what you went in there to talk about, regardless of the outcome. Don't be intimidated. I think I've mentioned this before. One of my very first lobby visits was when I lived in Atlanta. I went to go visit the office of late Representative John Lewis. I was so intimidated. It was John Lewis, right? And I completely forgot what I was going to say. I was there to talk about immigration, and the person I was with was like, you should probably mention that you're DACA, because this was right when DACA was being threatened, like 2018-ish. So it's super easy to get intimidated. I have been there, but like I mentioned, at the end of the day, your elected officials are there to serve their community and you. Sometimes, depending on what the staff looks like or where they are in the branches of government, you may want to suggest follow-up. A meeting with the district staff is always good, and keeping that relationship going, updating members regularly. All of that is really important when you are working with elected officials. And then once you have your meeting, after everything has been wrapped up, make sure to send a thank you note to both the member and the staff. I like to make my thank you notes virtually in Canva. I think they're really cute, very personable, lots of fun. And then I send them as PDFs to whoever I was visiting with. And if they allow you to, I always like to take a picture of the Zoom using the screen snap feature, and you can post it on social media, share it with your congregation, and tag them in it. That can go a really long way. I think elected officials are always looking for those social media moments to share with their constituents. So I think it's always a cute little detail to record this, or to take a photo and just have a memento of the visit. So I will pass it on to Tiffany, who will talk a little bit about pitfalls to avoid.
Thanks, Miriam. Those are some great tips. I love that you make the thank you note in Canva. A nice touch. I bet they really appreciate that. If we can go to the next slide. While we're doing that, I want to lift up, I saw some discussion in the chat, lots of reacting to Miriam's tips, and Mel also pointed out to research what committees the legislators are on, and gear your messaging and conversation towards that. I think that's a great tip. No, that's part of sort of knowing who you're meeting with, and knowing where they're at mentally. Miriam mentioned this, running out of time, a pitfall, and sticking to a tight agenda is hard to do. And she also mentioned it can be hard to keep them on topic, but make sure you keep them and your team on topic. And you can also know how much time you have going into the meeting. You can ask that. It's a great way to sort of ask the scheduler when you're setting up the meeting. And you can also ask that at the very beginning of the meeting too, just so you know, so I want to make sure we're mindful of respecting everybody's time. How much time do you know? Just so if it's 10 minutes and you're at minute 8, you know you need to sort of get moving before your lawmaker gets the hook and has to go. Staying on message. And being disciplined and staying on message, not staying on message. It's easy to get off message, but you are also there to represent IPL or an IPL affiliate. And so don't bring up any other issues, any other side issues, policy issues that you're not there to talk about. You want to stay focused on just the bills and the agenda that you're there to talk about. And then Miriam talked about the value of social media, and don't underestimate the value of social media posts. Twitter is where it is at these days for politics and the media, and our lawmakers and decision makers know that and also appreciate that. So keep that in mind afterwards. And then just in general, remember it is, we keep saying this, but it is about building this relationship. And that means continuing contact with them. Miriam's tips of sort of that follow-up note is so important. Continuing contact with their office, and don't be disappointed if they're not supportive at first. It can take time. So I think now we can go to, a quick question of what is Canva? Maybe Miriam, could you quickly answer that?
Yeah, of course. So I saw a couple questions for me. First one, what is Canva? It is canva.com is an app used to design pretty much anything you can print. I just makes things, it's really nice and crisp, and you can design something. I always like it. And then someone else asked if I send the agenda to the members and the staff. I think it depends on the relationship. If you do not know the member and they're suddenly getting something from you, they'll probably be confused. And most of the time the staffer will pass on the agenda anyway, but it definitely depends on the relationship, I think.
Thank you. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Tiffany. Well, you all now are ready for lobby visits. Even if you're feeling apprehensive, I would just remind you that you don't have to be an expert on these issues. You just have to be a constituent who cares about these things. So we'll be dropping into the chat a link where you can sign up for getting connected with a lobby team and having a lobby visit with your legislators' offices. We'll also have a Google Drive folder, and I think we'll be sharing a link now, as well as sending it out by email, that has one-pagers on those priorities that I talked about earlier. Priorities for this current COVID relief package, and also for the longer-term infrastructure recovery.
We will also be, so Jonathan mentioned, we'll send, those links are in the chat, or will be in the chat here in a moment, and we'll send those out as a follow-up email along with the recording for this and the slide deck after this meeting. I think we are good. If we could go to the next slide, and we have some time for Q&A. I saw some coming into several into the chat, and then also and then in the Q&A box. So it looks like, Jonathan, do you want to take that first one from about $100 million supported by both parties?
Sure, yeah. The question is the $100 million for environmental justice supported by both parties, or is this looking to be cut out by Republicans? I don't think this is a priority that has, or this is a fund that has registered with Republicans this time around. It's an initiative that's been led by Democrats. But we did unfortunately see in some of the COVID relief that was passed last year, kind of scorn from some Republicans around funding for environmental justice. And that was unfortunate, but I think it was genuinely a lack of understanding. I don't think that those members understood the connection, the relationship between funding for environmental justice and responding to COVID-19. And so that is really important education that you can be doing with any office you're meeting with anywhere on the political spectrum. Just explaining to them that we have the data showing that extra pollution causes extra deaths from COVID-19.
Thanks, Jonathan. And we have another good question in here. That either maybe you or Miriam could answer. Should you always end with an ask about where the legislator stands on legislation, and will they support it?
I can take that one. I definitely think it depends on what the lobby visit really looks like and how it plays out. Sometimes you will know the answer to your ask within the first 5 minutes of having the conversation. So I think it's always worth to ask the question, but it just, the way that you pose it really depends. But I don't know, sometimes I've been in lobby visits where they just shut me down immediately. And it is just really discouraging, but I think best practice is to do it, yes.
Thanks, Miriam. So we have a couple of questions actually that I think are sort of in a similar vein, but opposite sides. So we have one that's a question about meeting with, I know my legislators share my views. What do I do? Should I not bother lobbying them? And then also sort of on the opposite side of that, my senator's Tommy Tuberville, and I can't even imagine how to get started at lobbying him on these issues. And so maybe Jonathan and Miriam, do you have thoughts on sort of just the value of like how to start with both of those? And should we still be meeting with legislators who are champions on this? And what is the value there?
Yeah, definitely. Sure. Well, I mean, I'm guessing that's a question that many folks on this webinar have. And I would just say, even if your legislator shares your views, they may share your views on 100 different issues, but they're only going to have time to prioritize, 4 or 5 of those. So having a meeting with them where you say, yes, I know we agree on this, but this is the bill I want you to be working on, that's still incredibly impactful because they have a really broad range of things that they're choosing from. On the far other side, I will say that there are a lot of conservative, especially senators, in the last few years who are, they really do understand the science of climate change at this point. And they are recognizing that some kind of action is going to be needed. In some cases, they are scared of the response from their base, from their constituents, if they're speaking out on these issues. So I think it's absolutely, no matter who your representatives are, worth starting that conversation and just seeing what they have to say. Especially for those most conservative offices, the faith voice can be a really important starting place. I know that there are often offices that some of our partners who are secular environmental organizations can't talk with, that we can have a meeting with and start those conversations.
Thanks, Jonathan. We've got another question from PJ in Puerto Rico. She said, I wonder, so this question was specific to Jonathan when you were presenting some of the opportunities this year. She said, I wonder if that's funding that's available for community resilience centers in Puerto Rico. So the 75 million and churches qualify. And if that could be a model for lots more funding nationally for all churches or congregations.
For the environmental justice funding, is that what they're referring to?
I think that's right.
I am not sure what the distribution looks like for that. That's a great question. And yeah, that's something we've seen that also I think the faith community needs to be speaking on. I know that DC did not receive proper funding in one of the first COVID relief packages, and I think that's been true for some other non-state parts of the US also. So I don't have a great answer to your question, but it's an important one to keep an eye on.
Thanks, Jonathan. And PJ, glad to see you're happy to help. In the chat, I see another question that maybe Miriam would be a good fit for you. When you have a relationship with a staffer, what do you communicate with them in advance of your organization's new conference? When you have a relationship with a staffer, what do you communicate with them in advance of your organization's new conference or article to be published?
Is that like, I think news conference, right?
Actually, Keith, that looks like.
Us?
Well, while we're waiting on that, it looks like I see one more question. Do you have to be an expert on legislation to lobby?
No, definitely not. It is enough to say that, this is the bill or the initiative that we're excited about. This is why we care about it. Sharing your personal stories about why it's important and how you think it would impact your life. and you can always say that I or someone else will follow up with answers on technical questions.
Yeah, and it's building on that. It's perfectly fine in these meetings to say that if you get a question to say I don't know, but I'll find out and get back to you. And then you reach out to Jonathan or myself, and one of us will help you figure that out and get you the information to get back to them with. And it looks like Keith responded saying that he was referencing a news conference.
Okay, so if you are, just clarifying, if you have a relationship with a staffer, do you communicate with them that you are going to be talking about their member during a staffer news conference? Is that correct? I would say specifically in relation to if you're going to be posting on social media, for sure, I always let them know, hey, this is going to go up on my Twitter. Is that okay? So that is just more on the courteous side. If you're putting out, and I feel like every organization has their own guidelines to news conferences and articles that are being written. I think you definitely, it depends on the situation. Obviously, if you have a relationship with a staffer and you're writing an op-ed or you're just tearing into their representative because they are completely okay with a legislation that is just not aligning with your values, and that's going to be different than if you just mention them in your weekly newsletter. So I think it really depends on how you approach the situation. I know that's not a very clear answer, so I apologize, but lobbying is very nuanced, is I think what we can say.
I think that's a great way of capturing. Nuanced is a good term, and it's all about that relationship, depending on the relationship. Well, I think we are wrapping up. There might be a few, there looks like maybe we have time for one more quick question and then we'll need to move on. I did see a quick short one from Fran. She said, I've heard that Twitter is always read by staffers. And I think that's right. I think staffers, well, I guess maybe it depends on the member and the legislator. Some legislators are very clearly the ones managing their own Twitter accounts, but others are not even paying attention to it, but their staff are. Jonathan, Miriam, do you have anything else to add about Twitter?
As a former staffer, I was always on Twitter. So yes, I agree.
Perfect. Yeah. Twitter is important in this realm. Well, thank you all, Jonathan and Miriam, for sharing your tips. I'm going to move back on and turn it back over to Reverend Susan to give us a closing.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you, Jonathan, Tiffany, Miriam, to everyone who was with us today, and all of your great questions. I did see that Mel asked a question about what Speaker Pelosi had said to we had a meeting of religious leaders with Speaker Pelosi and others when we were in Madrid at COP25. And it is notable that the faith message, the moral message really resonates with our members of Congress, with our policymakers at all levels. It is a unique voice and one that they don't often hear from. They are lobbied by business and industry and, all sorts of folks. But the religious voice is a powerful one and a unique one. And as was shared by our speakers today, we don't have to be experts. We just have to care. We have to be passionate about the issue. And to talk about why it's important to us, and to say it's important to us from because of our faith, because of our calling as religious people, is an important one to share. So I just want to encourage you to speak with that voice, and never forget how important it is to speak from our religious traditions. And as we close today, I just want to say I'm reminded of the words of the Youth Poet Laureate, Amanda Gorman. She has a beautiful poem called Earthrise. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Some of you probably are. But in it, the phrase that I am always struck by, I've watched her video of this multiple times, and she has a phrase that she uses that we refuse to lose. We refuse to lose. And I think that that is so powerful. And the voice of the faith community is powerful and prophetic. So as you make your plan to advocate and lobby for bold and just climate policy, I just want to send you off with this blessing. May the sacred wind be at your back, and may we all refuse to lose. Blessings to you all. Take good care. And thank you again for being here today.